When I graduated, I decided to audition for KITE in the old transit tower in San Antonio. I went up there and sang for them, and by golly, if they didn't take me on right away. So I was in pretty good company, and I had a great sponsor out of New Braunfels called Kamal Cottons. And my theme song, of course, was Cotton Eye Joe, and we gave away samples on the air and had a great run there for a year and a half or so. And when I left there, I went into disc jockeying. That's when I went to KCNY in San Marcos, and I went to New Braunfels. I was the first disc jockey there on KGNB, and from there I went to KWED in Seguin, and from there I went to KBOP in Pleasanton, and from there I went to WOAI. And Willie Nelson took my place as a disc jockey. And he told me once, he said, I listened to you on the radio before I ever knew him. I'm 4 years older, by the way, than Willie, and you take those things kind of for granted at the time, but when you get older and you look back, well, they are worth something as a memory. Well, it was at WAI. I had a show every morning at 11:30 until 12. And what we did back then, we had a librarian who took care of the record library. And I didn't play my own records. I was in a little studio, and the engineer was in an adjoining studio, and we had a little squawk box. We talked back and forth, and I'd go in and pick the records for my show, and then she would make 2 copies of the songs for that day and give the engineer one, and I had one. So he played the records, I introduced him. And one day I go in to pick up my records, and for some reason I'll never understand, I looked into the wastebasket by her desk, and there in the trash I saw a little 45 RPM record, Sun label. Ray's gone out, and out of curiosity, I got it out of there and wiped it off. And Johnny Cash, Cry, 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 and Hey Porter was on the other side, his very first record. I said, "What's this doing in the trash?" The lady said, "Oh, he's no good. Somebody new. I just threw it away." I said, "Well, if you don't mind, I'd like to listen to it." So I took it back into the control room. The engineer played it for me, and I said, "Man, that's some new sound that I haven't heard. It's sparse, but I love it." So I took it back to the library, and I said, "Put this on my show today." And I'm so glad I did. I forget how long it was, a few weeks or maybe 2 or 3 months. About to go on the air, and the operator calls me and says, "Somebody's out here to see you." And I said, "Well, I'm about to go, and I don't have time to see them right now. By the way, who is it?" She said, "He says his name is Johnny Cash." I said, "Bring him back." And boy, was I glad I did. And he was nervous, but he made me kind of nervous too. And well, that was before he dressed in black. And he had his nephew with him, come to think of it. He was married to Vivian Liberto, girl from San Antonio. And he hadn't been out of the service very long. And so he was kind of like an ordinary guy, but he still had that. He's always looked like a nervous cat to me, you know? It's just his way. And but he was so friendly. He was really nice to me. And he felt like that he was being honored, and I felt like I was being honored. God, I was just like in my 20s then, and I'm 88 now, so. But we had a great meeting. And so I guess it was about 3 or 4 months later, we carried the Grand Ole Opry on WAI, or NBC affiliate. On Saturday nights, I think it was 8:30, the Opry came on. They were sponsored by Prince Albert Pipe Tobacco. And Johnny Cash was making his debut on the Opry that night, and I was on duty. And I listened to him, and he was nervous again. Made me kind of nervous listening to him. Finally, after the show was over, somebody interviewed Benny Pearl, and Benny Pearl said, "That new fellow, he's sure nervous here tonight, but golly, he's going to be a big star." Wow, how true that was.
Do you remember what Johnny played on the Opry that night?
Well, yes, he played Cry, Cry, Cry. He played Hey Porter. And I don't know whether Folsom Prison Blues had come out yet. I know in subsequent appearances he played it, and I walked the line.
I can only imagine what it'd be like sitting in rural Texas listening to the Grand Ole Opry and Johnny Cash coming on.
Well, of course, when we did that, that was before Johnny Cash's time, and it was Roy Acuff then,
The string bean,
String Bean, and what a wonderful old man that played the
Paul
bass.
Jones, Uncle Dave Macon.
No, Uncle Dave Macon, yeah. He was a wonderful character. And when I was at K-Bar Radio, we had Grandpa Jones on a show at the Municipal Auditorium. And we were sitting back in the dressing room. I was with some of the other DJs, and this fellow comes through the door, and he looks like a banker. And he's got this beautiful suit on and tie, and somebody said, "That's Grandpa Jones. He hasn't put on his regalia yet for it." I was working for WLVN on a cold November afternoon, and we were doing a remote broadcast from a furniture store in Nashville. And I had taken the top 30 records with me. They were all honky-tonk songs. In fact, one of the songs was Hank Williams' "I'll Never Get Out of This World Alive." And while I was on the air that afternoon, the newsman called, said, "We got a bulletin. The president's been shot." President Kennedy. And so we were going back and forth with bulletins. And here I'm sitting with those honky-tonk songs and songs like that Hank Williams tune, "I'll Never Get Out of This World Alive." And I thought, this is wrong. These songs aren't working at all. And this is the second time in my long career this has happened to me, as it did with that Johnny Cash song. This time, I saw down in the floor, in the corner, in the cobwebs, an old 45 RPM record. And I looked at it out of curiosity, wiped it off, and it was Mother Maybelle playing the auto harp, the bells of St. Mary's. And I played that song over and over that afternoon. In 1980, my wife and I were in Nashville working with an artist, and we saw in the paper where they were having a garage sale at the House of Cash. We had to go. Great stuff, nothing cheap. But there were the three sisters, June, Anita, and Helen. And I said to Norma, I said, "I've got to go talk to June." I went up to her and I said, "June, I'm Aaron Allen, and I was on the air the day President Kennedy was assassinated." And I told her the story I just told you up to the point where I found her mother's record. And how I played it all day long, all show long. And I can still see the tears running down her cheeks when I told her that story. Yeah. So in 1958, WOAI decided to send me to Nashville to a DJ convention. And I was in high cotton. I had me a brand new 57 T-Bird. I mean, I was flying high. And I go up there and get up to the Andrew Jackson Hotel where the convention was held, and I didn't, I think the Jackson Hotel is no longer there. But anyway, that night, cars everywhere. The place was so crowded I could hardly get in. And I asked the doorman, I said, "Oh, what's going on here?" "Oh, we're waiting on Johnny Cash and his entourage." I said, "Oh." And in a few minutes, here he comes, tripping the light fantastic. And I'll never forget those boots he had on, buttoned up the side. And I said, "I got to get me some boots like that." He gets up on the podium, paparazzi everywhere, flash bulbs going off. He's signing autographs, and I'm standing on the periphery of the crowd thinking he'll never talk to me again. And I'll be good damned if he didn't spot me. He spied me, and he pointed to me, and everybody looked at old Double A, and he says, "You see that guy back there?" He was the first guy who ever interviewed me on the radio. I said, "Well, I guess you didn't forget me after all."
Well, if you could get in a time machine and go back and ask Johnny questions, what would you ask him now?
What got you on the pills? And where do you think the incentive and the great backbone that you have and the courage you have to get off of them the way you did without any help from doctors or outside sources? And what was it about June Carter that made you fall in love with her? Well, it'd have to be a very late interview in the latter part of his life when I'd have to ask him about Nashville and why they treated him like they did. And and I'd have to say, you know, when you were in that publication, I forget which one it was, and you was giving Nashville the finger. Well, what kind of closure did you get from that?
It was Billboard magazine.
Oh, yeah, it was Billboard.
I really appreciate you inviting me into your living room and sharing stories.
Oh, well, listen, it's been my pleasure. It's good to meet you, and I never thought I'd have the opportunity for somebody to be interested enough in me to come up here all the way from Nashville and talk to me like you have. God bless you.
I really appreciate it. It's beautiful.